Have you ever wondered what the characteristics and functions are of a small group? Well, in order to know these, you need to know the definition of a small group. A definition found was a collection of people working interdependently to accomplish a task. Small groups are usually about 3 to 20 people. The first two characteristics stated were applying knowledge and communication. It can be hard for people to communicate with people they don't know, and it's important to make sure everyone's communicating properly. In the book Communication Matters, in Chapter 9 on page 134, it gives a great example. It states that in 1942, a small group of farmers near Americus, Georgia, began discussing a concept that they called partner housing. This idea was to let people who they are, or let people in need help with volunteers to build simple, affordable houses. These houses would be sold at very little interest at no profit to those in need of homes. What began as a small, simple group back in the day has grown to be an organization that have over 2 million volunteers, and they provide shelter for over 6.8 million people in the world. I know it's cheesy to say, but you need to trust the process. It is important to trust one another in the group and understand that process doesn't come overnight, especially not with projects like these. Another characteristic is being distinguished by size. Small groups are usually about 3 to 20 people, and size does matter. The smaller the groups, the more personal the members can be with each other and more connections can be made between the members. The larger the group is, the more interpersonal they are, and it can be hard for some people to communicate exactly how they feel. It is also important to understand interdependence. You have to realize that everything affects everyone. And cohesiveness is another characteristic. This is just working together. It's like harmony and melody. There is task cohesiveness and social cohesiveness. Task cohesiveness is working to accomplish a task. Social cohesiveness is the level of positivity regarding all the members. It is also very crucial to enforce rules and norms. Groups usually discuss these in the beginning, and it's very important to follow these throughout the entire group's projects. Everyone should be valued, and no one should be feeling left out from their values. It is also important to remember everyone's own identities. Everyone comes together to make a group, and you no longer can say it's me and someone's group. It's important to say the group's project rather than just 2 people in the group or 2 or 3 people. It is also very important to set boundaries and respect everyone's boundaries. There are 4 different types of distinctive communication practices. There's problem-solving communication, role communication, cohesiveness, raising communication, and encounter communication. These range from details of tasks to being informal or formal to strengthening our identities. And we are just now starting to get used to all this online stuff, but groups have been doing these for a while. It can be hard for people who are located in many different areas or cities or even countries to meet face-to-face. And face-to-face communication is very important because communication can be verbal and nonverbal. It is also important to think about the functions. In order to understand why a group is made up, you need to remember you all have the same purpose and task in mind. Everyone contributes to the group positively. Small groups have 7 focuses. They focus on discrete tasks, evaluate and advise, create art or ideas, can provide service and support, promote social networking, completion, and help people learn. When we evaluate and advise, we all come together to form groups and talk about common issues to discuss how we want to resolve them and what we want to do. Sometimes focus groups can be made. This is where 6 to 10 members of different groups can come together and discuss ideas and get other hearings from other groups and have other help outside of people from their own group. Some people's sole purpose is to create music. This can be shown as how creating our ideas is one of the functions. When a musician is getting with their band and performing, their primary focus is for the form of art. It is also important to think about support, and service. Sometimes support groups can be made. These provide support emotionally or physically. When we think of complete groups, we think of sports. You work interdependently to accomplish the team's goals, and sometimes help can be found in study groups. We need to understand materials and prepare for tests, and support groups and like study groups can help you with that. And yeah, I'm done.
All right, am I up then? So I should just go. All right, so why do we join small groups? There are many reasons why we join small groups. Some of them are to belong, to be protected, to improve our effectiveness, and to make us feel like we have a purpose. We join small groups because we need to belong. Family and friends do provide a lot, but we also need the sense of social belonging that only small groups do provide. In order for us to feel like we are fitting in, we need to find a small group that helps us fit in. Some of these may be a group of friends, or such as a church group, fraternity, sorority, any of those. These small groups can help when you feel left out of place and feel left out. The next one is that we join small groups for protection. The biggest thing here is safety in numbers. This can help with abductions, kidnappings, sex trafficking, all of that, because there's strength in numbers. I feel like the stronger also help protect the weaker. This would be an example of like hunter and gatherers. Back in the day, like the hunter would protect the gatherers and kill off the animals, while the gatherer would get resources to build arrows and stuff like that. Another good example of this would be an AA program, an alcohol abuse program, is because when someone feels like they have the need to drink, they can always count on the other person to help them out. Another reason why we join small groups is for effectiveness. This helps people be more efficient and effective overall. A good example of this would be a weight loss program. By participating in these, it brings a sense of competitiveness, and also it helps you be accountable by your others and makes you lose weight together as a team, which makes it more effective. Then the next thing is there's 5 phases of joining and exiting a group. The first phase is the antecedent phase. This is when people develop the similar beliefs, attitudes, and expectations about a group. This is where the group is sort of like formed. After that is the anticipatory phase, which is when you join or you make decisions about what the group's expectations are and stuff like that. And then the next stage is the encounter phase. This is when you have the first meeting and you establish all the missions and the goals, and then you assign responsibilities and roles to members. And yeah, and then the next stage is the assimilation phase. In this phase, members accept the culture, and instead of saying I go to or me, it becomes a we meet then and stuff like that. And they also have a brand or like a t-shirt that matches and stuff like that. And then the last stage is the exit stage. This is when the group becomes, it either ends or someone becomes dissatisfied and leaves the group. There are both advantages and disadvantages of small groups. Some of the disadvantages are small groups do require lots of sacrifice. It's lots of time put in, lots of things that you can't do, like go to a baseball game, go to a football game, watch a football game, stuff like that. And then another disadvantage is that small groups do experience conflicts. A big one that I came across in the book was that half the group wants to spend money towards this, and then the other half of the group would want to spend money towards another thing, and both the things would make the group a much better place, but they don't really know where it should be spent at. And then another conflict would be that small groups can be difficult to coordinate. As we've seen in this project, it's been pretty hard for us all to be here at the same time with sports and work and stuff like that, but we figured it out. And then some advantages are that small groups provide resources. There can be people from all over the place with different areas of expertise that help with lots of different things. So when you may not have an answer to something, someone else could. And then another advantage is that small groups experience synergy. Synergy in the book, the example for synergy was the Avengers working together, and how when they worked together, it was much better than when it was just one-on-one or like their individual movies. I always liked the group movies better. And then another advantage was diversity. A good example of this one was by having two juries in a court case, it allows more people and more different views to see the case overall. It may take longer to get the verdict, but at least the verdict will be more accurate due to more diversity. And then the last section I had was becoming a better small group communicator. When new members are joining, you should always accept them with open arms. They may feel uncomfortable at first, and unsure how to act because they don't know for sure about like the priorities and the goals and the expectations. And then one way to help is one-on-one time, just go over all the culture stuff and all the identities and help them find the identity of the group. And then when you are a new member, it is important to embrace the culture, communicate in ways that reflect the group's culture, and acquire the appropriate skills to learn your role fast and stick to your responsibilities. Also, when you're a new member, is learn what matters. This can be hard, but try to figure out what's best for the group and how the group's goals and priorities apply to you. And then it should be easier to achieve the goals together. And then also, you should contribute to the group, know your role, know your responsibilities, and do them. And then it can be intimidating to join the group at first, but these steps are very important to help you feel comfortable. And that's it.
Okay, is it my turn then, right? Okay. So my section is how small groups develop ideas. There are various methods in which people do this, and the most commonly known is brainstorming, which we've all probably done. This is where everyone just offers any ideas that they have, and the group discusses them all together. It's very common. The things to remember when doing this is that you want to be creative and come up with new ideas and different ideas. You want to urge total contribution so that everyone in the group shares their thoughts, and allow piggybacking where people can discuss off of each other's ideas. The next method that is used is called the nominal group technique. This is where groups generate ideas, where each person generates ideas independently, and then the group all comes together and shares them and discusses them after developing them independently. The final method it discussed was called idea writing. This is where each person gets a sheet of paper and writes about 3 to 4 ideas on it. Everyone puts their sheets in the middle, and each person randomly selects a paper that isn't theirs. Then they would evaluate the ideas and write its strengths and weaknesses on the paper. You repeat this until everybody in the group has seen everyone else's paper, and then you would get your paper back, read the ideas and the feedback aloud to the group, and then all the members would discuss what they feel and compile a list of the best ideas. When making decisions, there are various methods that groups use as well. The first is unanimous consensus. This is where everyone has to support the decision. Sometimes this is the only option, like when in a jury, the entire group has to agree on one verdict, and sometimes this is just what the group decides. This isn't usually easy, and it often comes with complications. One of these is called stalemate. This is where members' views are so different that they just cannot reach consensus, and after a long time of discussing, they just cannot seem to agree, and that's hard to get through. And another is false consensus, where group people just like give up and say that they support what the consensus is when they really don't, which happens often. Whenever this happens in a unanimous consensus, just remember to be patient and open to other people's thoughts, because sometimes it can get a bit heated. The next is majority rule, which we have heard a lot, which is where you follow the will of the majority. So if there's 50 people and 26 of the 50 vote yes, then you would go with yes, even though it was so close numbers. Sometimes this can end in a tie, which makes things tricky, but the third is minority rule. This is where a small number of group members are elected to make decisions for the group. So whether I think of this as like a parent committee or a school board where they make decisions for the whole group. And the fourth is authority rule, which is where there's a leader of the group that makes the decisions for the group. There's all different times where each of these are applicable and best used. So when making decisions, there are some cultural effects that play a role in how the group dynamic works. One of which is individualism, which is how much group members prioritize themselves and their needs compared to like the other members. The second is power distance and how their culture distinguishes power. Some cultures believe everyone should have a say more than others believe more of an authoritarian view. And the third is time orientation. Some cultures value certain time-saving methods more than others, so that can lead to discrepancies. Cultural effects play a role in people's viewpoints and how the group can come to consensus, so just be patient and aware of this when discussing in a group. I'm done.
All right, I think I'm next. So I got all the different aspects of leaders. So every leader is different, but they often share similar traits and fit into certain styles of leadership. Leaders often share certain physical traits. Several studies have found that men are favored over women for leadership roles, regardless of who is actually the better leader. Being tall has also been shown to be connected with what people think makes a good leader. For example, 31 out of the 46 U.S. presidents have been above the average height. Attractiveness has also been connected with what people think makes a good leader. This is because being attractive is often associated with competence, intelligence, and honesty. Levels of fitness is also connected with what people see as a good leader. A study done by German researchers Peter Limbach and Floria Sonnenberg found that CEOs that ran marathons companies were valued 4 to 10% higher than CEOs that didn't run marathons. Effective leaders also seem to share certain psychosocial traits. One psychosocial trait that seems to make people better leaders is high self-esteem. This is because people with high self-esteem are usually more confident. Self-monitoring is another psychosocial trait that has been linked to effective leadership. Self-monitoring is how our own behavior affects others. This is a quality of a good leader because good self-monitors can change their behavior to fit the needs of the group. Leaders who are extroverted are seen as better leaders compared to more introverted people because leaders have a very social job and extroverts are usually much more comfortable interacting with people than introverts are. Although all these physical and psychosocial traits are seen very commonly in leaders, this does not mean that a leader cannot be great without these traits. Aside from their physical and psychosocial traits, leaders fit somewhere within three main leadership styles: democratic, laissez-faire, or autocratic. Democratic leaders give every person the opportunity to participate in decision-making. Democratic leaders make everyone feel included, but this can really slow down decision-making. Laissez-faire leaders give as little direction and interact with the people they are in charge of as little as possible. This leadership style works when followers are best work with little supervision, but it can cause problems if the person that is working isn't an expert at what they are doing. The third leadership style is autocratic. This is when the leader makes all the decisions for the group and other group members have minimal say. This style is very efficient and works well when the leader is an expert in what the group is doing, but if the leader starts making bad decisions, this can really hinder the group. To accomplish these goals, no matter their leadership style, leaders rely on the use of power. There are 6 different types of power that leaders use: reward, coercive, referent, legitimate, expert, and informational. Reward power is when leaders reward their followers for certain actions. This power is usually in the form of pay raise or a promotion. Leaders also use coercive power, which is the opposite of reward power. Coercive power is when a leader punishes people for not doing what they want. An example of this would be a judge having the power to send a prisoner to jail or not to. Referent power is the power of attraction. People are more inclined to do what people they admire or find attractive say. This can be seen when a famous celebrity endorses a product. People who look up to them or want to be them will buy it. Legitimate power is gained by a person's status or position. This can be seen when a person gets a promotion and has more power over making decisions in their company. If this person loses this position, they will lose the ability to exercise legitimate power over certain things. Expert power is attained through being an expert in a certain area. Doctors have expert power because people trust what they say because they assume the doctor is an expert in their field. Finally, informational power is when someone or a group of people have the power to decide what information people get and what information people don't get. This can be seen when governments control the media in their countries. Hopefully now that you know more about the different physical, psychosocial traits, leadership styles, and types of power leaders use, you'll be able to become a better leader yourself and better evaluate other leaders.
All right, so I'll be talking about decision making and some of the different styles. So conflict is bound to arise anytime we work in small groups due to individuals' different opinions and just their individuality. But luckily, there are a few ways that we can avoid this. Before we learn how to avoid it, though, we need to recognize the 4 different decisions making styles. So the first one is the competing style, and this is where the group members have a high concern for themselves and a low concern for others. I like to think of this kind of like in a courtroom. So the attorney and the defendant have a high concern for getting what they want, and the state or the other side obviously has a high concern for what they want, and then a low concern for the defendant and the attorney. This decision-making style can motivate both parties, but it can also divide them once a decision is made. The second decision-making style is the avoiding style. This is where the group members have both a low concern for themselves and a low concern for the other party. Group members often use this style when they either genuinely don't care about the issue or they're too afraid to confront the issue. And this style is often very unsatisfying because usually a solid decision isn't made and you don't really get anywhere. Then the third decision-making style is accommodating, and this is where the group members have a low concern for themselves and a high concern for the other party. This style often keeps the peace, but in some cultures it can be seen as weak, like you're kind of flying the white flag and surrendering. But in other cultures, it can be seen as respectful and like you're kind of taking the high road and being the bigger person. So the fourth decision-making style is collaborating, and this is where the group has a high concern for themselves and a high concern for the other party in the situation. So we see this a lot in bipartisan politicians. They obviously take both parties' opinions and viewpoints into consideration and try to make the best bill or the best decision that they can based on those two opinions. And although this method often takes the most time and takes a lot of patience, it is the best. It's most satisfying for both parties in the decision-making process. And then one pitfall of working in groups is something called groupthink. And from our textbook, groupthink can be defined as a situation in which group members seek an unanimous agreement despite individual doubts. So there are 8 warning signs of groupthink. And the first one is the illusion of invulnerability. And this is where the group members are often overly confident, and because of this, they're kind of full of themselves, and they tend to ignore smaller problems that might lie within the group or lie within the decision that they're making. Second is collective rationalization, and this is where the group constantly has to explain to others why they are the best and why their idea is the best and why other groups' ideas maybe aren't the best. These group members are often very closed-minded, like I said. And then third is the illusion of immorality, and this is the group that just kind of walks around and thinks that they are correct because they believe that they are morally correct and there's no other reason. Again, very full of themselves, and it can often lead them to overlook smaller issues within the group. Fourth is excessive stereotyping, and this is the group that thinks that anybody who doesn't agree with them or doesn't kind of fit in with them, that they'll think badly. So the group members will think badly of those people that don't agree. We see this a lot in high school, I think, where if you don't wear the certain clothes or you don't agree with a certain group of people, that you'll kind of be kicked out and stereotyped. Fourth is pressure for conformity, and this is very similar to the excessive stereotyping warning sign. This is the group that kind of deems anybody who doesn't agree with them as disloyal, and they kind of get either pushed to the side or kicked out of the group. Often, again, this is overlooking many smaller problems within the group. This happens a lot often in churches where, say, you don't follow a certain commandment, then you might be deemed as disloyal in the church. The sixth warning sign is self-censorship, and this is where the group kind of suppresses their own viewpoints and their own opinions just to keep the peace between the decision-making process. And this kind of goes hand in hand with the accommodating style because, like I said, it keeps the peace, but it can also be very unsatisfying because it is obviously suppressing their own viewpoints and not getting their voice heard, which is not good. And then seventh is the illusion of unanimity, which is the group that always assumes that they're correct simply because they haven't heard of any other viewpoints. So this kind of fits in with the conformity warning sign, because most of the times there are other viewpoints within the group, but they are just too scared to be brought up, or they are scared that they are going to be kicked out or deemed as disloyal from the group. And then the eighth warning sign of groupthink is mind guards. So a mind guard is something that prevents you from viewing or hearing information or other viewpoints. This happens on news stations a lot. So say you're with one party and you consistently watch news from a source that is consistently reports only facts from one party. This might be a mind guard for you because you're literally not hearing any other opinions or any other viewpoints from other parties. So to avoid groupthink, there are a few different things that you can do. First, you can just recognize the 8 signs that I just talked about. This is a great place to start. And then second, you can watch your time. So as somebody who recognizes these signs, maybe if your group is kind of crunching on time to make a decision quickly, you could offer that they take a little bit more time, or they extend their deadline to the decision being made so that you can really get a full range of opinions and everybody's voices can be heard. And then third, you can stand up for other opinions. Even if you don't agree with them, you could say, hey, Jim, what do you think? Or like, hey, let's consider this other opinion, just to get the ball rolling and to help maybe get some of those quieter people talking. And then lastly, you can listen effectively. So to listen effectively, first, you'll need to reduce any noise. So say you're trying to make a really important decision in a really loud room. You might want to say, hey guys, let's go into a quieter space so that everybody can think a little harder and it's not so chaotic. You can also distract boredom. So if you see people in your group getting bored or kind of zoning out, you can maybe ask them if they want to take a break, or you could do an icebreaker with them just so that they can come back fresh and ready to evaluate the situation. Next, you can reduce information overload. So if somebody in your group is presenting a ton of information super quickly, you can slow them down by asking clarifying questions, or by even staying late with other group members to try and help clarify the situation and the decision that is being made. And then lastly, you can listen before responding. So in today's society, I think a lot of times we draft up a response in our head before we're even done listening. So listening before responding really help you hear the whole opinion and the whole viewpoint before you draft your response. And yeah, that's all I have.